Thank you so much for coming, everybody. This topic is very dear to my heart. It's kind of an entry point into understanding giftedness. And so the goal of this talk is to give you like a sense of understanding how to tell if your child is gifted or not. And then also, I want you to walk away with some resources to understand, okay, what if my child is gifted? What is my next step? And then just some tips, kind of like what to expect with different ages and stages. What are other things that I need to know? The goal is to shortcut cutting through all this information out there and to also connect you with really good sources for information, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so I want you to also walk away with the best sources to cut through the vast amount of information out there and to not also miss out on anything important and key. So if you have any, if you could please stay muted and hold your questions until the end. We will then definitely have ample time for questions. Okay, so if you are here, congratulations, because yes, your child is gifted if you're wondering if they're gifted. How do I know that? Okay, how do I know that? So how I know that is that there's a place that works with, they do a lot of research about gifted, and it's called the Summit Center. It's in California. And Summit did a study, and I learned about the study. I haven't read the study. I've learned about it from Dr. Linda Silverman, who actually wrote the extended norms on the Pearson WISC-5. So this study is very interesting. So all these people were coming in for various reasons into the center, and people were asked as part of the study, is your child gifted or not gifted? And the interesting thing that happened is that 80% of the parents of the gifted kids answered it correctly. They correctly predicted that their kid was gifted. The parents whose kid wasn't gifted, they were saying, no, my child is not gifted, pretty consistently. And besides maybe a small margin of error, generally speaking, the non-gifted knew that their child was not gifted, and the gifted, 80% of gifted parents said, yes, my child is gifted. Now, the funny thing is 20% got it wrong. They missed that their child was gifted, because the gifted are largely humble. So the parents are largely humble. They think, oh, my child is just smart. My child is not better than any other child, which is not what gifted is. All children have special things about them that make them valuable, amazing human beings, unique and special. But giftedness is different from that. So generally speaking, 80% of the parents correctly identify their child. Parents of non-gifted correctly identify their child as non-gifted. And then 20% of parents of gifted kids, they misunderstand that their kid is gifted and they miss the whole thing. So that's why we're doing this talk, is to explain, like, if you think your kid is gifted, you're probably right. Statistically speaking, you're in the right place. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, I want to talk about the characteristics of gifted children. So one of the things that you will notice from a very young age about a gifted child is that they're very alert. They're switched on. Now, a lot of gifted, especially the profoundly gifted, when they're babies, they have colic. And so you might not catch these active alert moments because they're surrounded by all sorts of dysregulation due to colic and due to other things that happen to the gifted. But generally speaking, they're going to have really long active alert periods, whereas babies, you're at a loss as what to do with this baby that's still awake, still alert, still wants to interact, and they're just present. And so that's what you will see in a gifted baby. It's pretty obvious when you look at one. They could be very asynchronous in their development. So that means that, so generally speaking, babies can't learn multiple skills at the same time. They'll focus and kind of specialize either in large motor or in small motor stuff. And so you'll see some asynchronous development They can do something very, very advanced, maybe academically, but emotionally, they're still very much their age. So you'll see asynchronous development where some things are really high, but in other ways, they're very much their age. Gifted kids can reach milestones very early. Now, if the child has any kind of learning differences, the milestones can come with like a high-low profile. Like some gifted kids don't walk until after 2, don't talk until they're 4. That doesn't mean that they're not gifted. It just means that there's just more asynchronicity. So some of it is kind of funny. So gifted kids are like teenagers. They already know everything. So that you'll see like a lot of this like attitude where they're like, oh no, don't show me, I already know. They might know wrong, but they're convinced. So that you'll see that quite a lot. The other thing you need to watch out for with gifted kids is they will take your house apart to see how it all works. So you have to guard your appliances, guard your tools. They're all very unique. And so one of the things that I see a lot with teachers and in the educational community is that each child is not judged as an individual, but there's certain assumptions like, oh, they're gifted, so they're going to be equally good at everything. That's not always true. And so you really have to see each gifted child as an individual. And in fact, they're going to have a lot more individuality than an average child because everything is going to be really, really intense. Within a family unit, it's really easy to miss a gifted individual. So I see this a lot with gender differences. A parent will say, okay, my oldest is a boy, so good in math, gifted. My girl, not gifted. Look, she can't even do any math. So very, very common, or vice versa. Oh, my girl, she started reading at 2.5, but my son is not reading and he's 7. He's not gifted like my daughter. That is now how family units work. And so it's really easy to miss a gifted individual in the family if their gifts are different from other family members. So giftedness, you don't necessarily inherit like math giftedness so that everybody's gifted in math. You inherit, it's highly heritable, you inherit giftedness, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be in the same area or manifest itself at the same age and in the same way. So it's very easy to miss. One of the really unique characteristics of gifted children that is not something that you would see with an average child, and as somebody who runs a school, I really see this. It is cognitive leaping. So cognitive leaping is when you teach the child this stuff over here, and they leap over, and they've made a different conclusion suddenly. Okay, so they were able to understand not just the part that you taught them, but they made this connection and they jumped over. And you didn't have to teach them a bunch of stuff. They already figured it out from the stuff you already taught them. One of the characteristics of gifted is that they're really insatiably curious. It might not be global. I remember when my kid was about 18 months, my oldest, and I brought her to see a local gifted legend expert. And she gave my child like some snow globes. And they were pretty incredible, intricate snow globes. And my child was like, eh. So she wasn't interested at all. And she said, I want to go draw. So it's very easy to say like, oh, well, shouldn't this child be interested in these snow globes? Not if they have their own internal need to do something different. So they could be very difficult and could act out if they're understimulated. So yeah, come on in. They really can act very differently when they're happy and actively stimulated, and when they are bored. So you have like this kind of Jekyll and Hyde situation where like in one situation with one adult or one group of peers, the kid is like super switched on, super interested, super calm. And then with another situation, they're a complete train wreck because they're just really understimulated. Gifted children can be highly sensitive. So when they feel an emotion, they feel it more. I'll give you an example. this red here, this red is much louder to a gifted child than to a regular child. They perceive it a lot stronger. They perceive hues stronger. They perceive light stronger, sound. Um, they take on and take in a lot more, and they do a lot more with it. So they can be very highly sensitive. Recently, I was working with a student with an emotion wheel that I really like to use. And we're talking through the students' emotions. And, we got down to the edge of this emotion wheel, and it had like over 200 emotions in it. And the student is like, what's the word between this and this? And this word doesn't exist. So the student was having trouble identifying the emotion because we don't have a name for it in the English language. So that's very common, especially the more gifted. So the more profoundly gifted, the more highly sensitive they will be. Now, there was a scientist, and his name was Dabrowsky. He was a psychologist, and he actually said that gifted students or gifted children have something, and adults, it's not just children, have something called overexcitabilities, Dabrowski overexcitabilities. And he identified 5 separate areas of these. He identified psychomotor, sensual, emotional, intellectual, and imaginational overexcitabilities. Now, the thing is with the excitabilities, these people really stand out, and they look like they have quirks. So most gifted people will show 1 or more overexcitabilities, especially if they're going into their area of interest. They might really show these overexcitabilities. Now, people ask me all the time, at what point is an overexcitability a disability? When it impacts everyday life, right? So if it makes your life harder, it might be more than an overexcitability. But these overexcitabilities also cause a lot of misdiagnosis of gifted children, especially with things like ADHD, because a lot of gifted kids move around quite a lot. And that's because they have psychomotor excitability. And so you have to be very careful when working with psychologists who are not used to gifted kids, because they can take any of these areas and misunderstand them and misdiagnose the child with having some sort of a difference or disorder that is not a real thing. And so you'll see things like kids being labeled, thrown on medication over something that is actually just their giftedness. At the same time, gifted kids can cover up disabilities, but that's another talk. So another very important characteristic for gifted kids is that they notice patterns much more quickly, especially in their area of strength. That doesn't mean that they're going to do it globally, because with gifted kids, they can be switched on and actively alert when they're really into something. But as soon as it loses their interest, then they kind of tunnel out and they lose the ability to necessarily see these patterns. Kind of interesting. They have natural intuition and instincts. And this is the sad thing. One of the things that I'm kind of trying to work up is, how do we retain some of this natural intuition and instincts and not shut it down, especially in a school setting? Because there are a lot of things that kids can figure out with cognitive leaping. And then if they're really forced to explain it and they don't know how they got it, because what they're doing is using their intuition, then they're going to start silencing that intuition, because that inner voice that's telling them why something works might be silenced by society. So again, this is something that ideally we retain in our lifetimes. Gifted kids can also tunnel. So gifted kids, they can do something like an average 4 or 5-year-old, their attention span is about 5 minutes, okay, at the most. Gifted kids, they can give you 2-3 hours of attention. It's unparalleled. It will be better than some high school students. And it's in their area of interest. So they can sit there and work on it for an unusually long period of time. One of the most interesting characteristics of gifted kids is, so normally, like a 5-year-old is not going to work on the same drawing, or a 3-year-old on the same drawing or the same sculpture for more than their like one interaction with the sheet of paper, whatever they're working on. What does that mean? It means what you're not going to see in an average kid is that they start a work of art and they work on it every day for 2 weeks. But with gifted kids, that might be happening as young as 3, 4, 5 years old. They have an idea and they can sustain working on that idea for many days in a self-directed way. Nobody's telling them to do this. Nobody's making them do this. This is something that's almost like a need for them to create. So especially if they have the Dabrowsky imaginational or intellectual overexcitability, they might really have this need to be creative and create. And it, what are we talking about there? I'm talking about there's paper that is covering the entire length of your hallway in your house that you're not allowed to step onto, where they're working on their art project because they need all that space. It means that your house is not your house anymore, it's theirs. So gifted kids have very frequently an unusually strong memory. And then again, they're very creative in their area of interest and strength. And one of the things that you will see is they need very little, if any, repetition. So they also have a very strong sense of big picture, a very strong sense of injustice. So any kind of unfairness and injustice, it could really dysregulate them, especially if they have these emotional, sensual, intellectual, and imaginational overexcitabilities. If they see injustice, it can really affect them. Perfectionism. These kids turn, so an average 3, 5, 10-year-old, they're like, look, mom, look what I did, yay. An average gifted kid, they're tearing up everything that they make, okay? They destroy stuff very frequently because they're not happy. There's a lot of negative self-talk that as parents we have to turn into positive, and we have to teach them what is good enough, what is enough, period. Like a lot of these kids, a teacher gives an assignment, it's supposed to be something simple, and they need to keep going because it's not done to them. So it doesn't matter if they already did it to the teacher specification or to what society expects, they keep going. And then even if they've created the masterpiece, it's still not good enough for them. So one of your jobs as parents and educators is to help children sit in that discomfort of something not being perfect and learn what to do with all those strong feelings that they might have. The other area where students and children and even adults, gifted adults, have a very strong gift in is humor. So humor is a very, very interesting thing for gifted kids. People think that some gifted kids don't understand humor, that they're awkward. No, actually, they have a very well-developed sense of humor, and that could be one of the areas in which you will notice their gifts. One of the last things I want to mention, and you'll see some of these on like common gifted characteristics lists, but other ones you will not. And so these are coming from me working with profoundly gifted, highly gifted students as a population. You will see a sensation of no ceiling when you're teaching the child. So you'll explain a really advanced subject to a child and they're like, yep, I got it. And then you go up, yep, I still got it. And you can keep going up and never feel like you reach the part where they no longer can comprehend what you're telling them. So it's really cool, but it all makes it very difficult on parents and educators. Okay, now we're going to talk about the definition of giftedness. So what does giftedness mean? It depends on who you ask. So at the federal level, there's no definition. At the state of Illinois level, we do have kind of a definition that's fairly new. So it's less than 20 years old. So gifted education in Illinois, even though we have the second oldest and first biggest school district public school program here, right in the city of Chicago in Illinois, we only just recently got our state of Illinois gifted educational definition in our state of Illinois legislature, in our statutes, but it's really focused on achievement, and it's really vague. And then we are, so this number you'll see hotly debated, whether it's 5% or whether it's the top 2% or if it's the top 15%. What is the percentage of the population that's gifted. And these numbers all have different meanings based on what and who you're talking about. Because really, the top 15%, the top 20% of all kids generally could benefit from enrichment and kind of a push, a more of an opportunity to learn even more beyond the basic curriculum. So the definitions have purposes, and those purposes vary by who you talk to and what you're talking about. National Association for Gifted Children, I would highly recommend joining this organization. They have a pretty solid definition of giftedness. So that one is a really excellent one to use. So I'll read it to you. The term gifted and talented means students, children, or youth who give evidence of achievement capacity in such areas as intellectual, creative, artistic, or leadership capacity, or in specific academic fields, and who need services or activities not ordinarily provided by the school in order to develop these capabilities. So NAGC is very focused on the gifted children in school and education. There's also SANG that focuses on the social and emotional needs of gifted children. Again, an organization I would recommend. They wouldn't necessarily focus so much on schools and services, and also they wouldn't necessarily limit this to just intellectual and creative and artistic. They would probably include other things like sports. So we as a school have a more broad definition. We'll get there in just a second. And then at the federal level, the other thing that needs to be defined is 2E. That's gifted, but also with a second exceptionality, and that is some sort of a disability. So to all the parents out there who think that their kid, like down the line, you'll be like, oh, my kid is gifted. They're not 2E. They're not like those 2E kids. Does your kid wear glasses? Are they going to get glasses later? Chances are that's like a kind of a form of 2E, essentially. Like there's something going on. So don't assume that your kid is one way or the other. Some of the 2E has a kind of a fluidity to it. And it's not as big of a deal as people think it is. In the state of Illinois, just this March, we wrote, and I was on the committee that wrote it, we wrote the twice exceptional definition just in March. Like we're very, very early in the state of Illinois when it comes to gifted education. And so what we did here is we made it a very basic definition just to get something out there past various Board of Education agencies like their legal department and their communications department. We had to make it really basic. And so what we did is we tied the two together. We just said twice exceptional is gifted plus the definition of disability at the federal level. And the federal definition of disability is not current with the times. So there's one word in here that's changed to make it more inclusive. Let's see, levels of giftedness. Highly contested topic. I'm just going to be very high level. We'll make those slides available so you don't feel like you have to take a picture of everything, but you're welcome to. Not gifted, right? So not gifted is comes with a footnote. Anybody with IQ of about 120 probably didn't make it to gifted, but not always, because when kids have some sort of a disability, they could be invisible on gifted testing. And then if you want to learn more about that, come to the next time we have a 2E talk that explains what is 2E. Bright is IQ 120 to 129. And again, these numbers it depends who you talk to, right? Some will drop it down to 115. And the levels of giftedness kind of come from this psychologist, Dabrowsky. And so she says that this is an important gifted area, mostly because some of these kids are really these kids with a disability, and that's affecting how well they can take an IQ test. Because it is just a test, and this just captures the one moment in time when your kid takes the test. So for us, the real gifted starts at 98 percentile and up. And then again, some organizations start at 132. We think 130 is a nice round solid number. We like it. Highly gifted is 145. But the problem is that the tests, they stop being accurate on a lot of the tests at about 145. So within the standard deviations of 145 to 160, and 160 is the ceiling, you really can't tell where the child is because of how big the standard deviation is. And so a lot of people will say profoundly gifted with this 145, and it's just because the test tools we have don't discriminate that well. And then PG, many people will start this again at 145, some will start this at 160. And these are just kind of potential markers of what the child will achieve. They each have different categories. We do have a PG talk if you want to look for that. So very frequently, these kids could be at grade level. They could also be higher because this is just a predictor. And again, these tests are not that accurate. And then the population level for 145 is 0.13%. The population level of PG is 0.003%. And so that's 1 in 30,000 people will be profoundly gifted. These people are frequently 3 or more years ahead academically, but not always. So you could be below grade and be profoundly gifted in any one subject or multiple subjects. Again, your intellectual potential does not translate necessarily to academic potential. Okay, so again, this is just a predictor of capacity. Don't oversubscribe to the numbers. They don't make your child better or worse than anybody else. They're just predictors, and one of the worst things that we can do is assume that, oh, this number is low, this child will amount to nothing, this number is high. I am raising young Einstein, and they have arrived to cure cancer and the world of all of their problems. That's too much to put on yourselves or the child. So it could create a lot of anxiety as you're the one responsible for raising this person that's supposed to save the planet. So one thing that I really want to stress is it's perfectly fine to just be happy, and that's enough. So as a human being, that is much more important than some sort of like achievement. Even if the child has this high capacity, what we really should be focusing on as parents and with our children is how to be happy, not so much how to achieve, how to learn to persevere. Those are the things that are more important. So an IQ is a summary of how well your organs are working together really on tasks. And then, these are specific tasks that some random academics determined are more distinguished and more valuable than other tasks. There's some myths about gifted children I really want to talk about. So one myth is all gifted children read before 5, start walking and talking early, like by 1, and don't sleep. Yeah, some do, some don't. Don't oversubscribe to that. All gifted children are high achieving. Not true. However, they're more likely to achieve the more well-regulated and happy they are. So if you want to see more achievement, I would say focus on figuring out what makes your child tick, right? What is it that they care about, and approach them from that area of strength. High achievement is the goal of raising a gifted child. Not true. It should be raising a happy child. And then a lot of the pitfalls of having gifted children is people, the kids use very advanced language, and they'll tell you what should be happening. And so it doesn't mean that gifted children should get fewer boundaries about behavior. And they didn't earn that by being so smart. Like, they should still have boundaries of some sort. Are a piece of cake to parent? Oh, you're so lucky your child is gifted. No, they're not a piece of cake to parent. And then another thing is, if a child is struggling, it's not always true to say, oh, you could just switch schools, it'll fix everything, especially for the twice exceptional. If you don't get to the bottom of what's going on, switching schools alone will not be a solution. Okay, so let's say you think your child is gifted. Should you get them tested? You only need gifted testing if you need your child to qualify for special programming. Otherwise, it's completely fine to not bother. Okay. If your child has any kind of struggle, or there's a family history of some sort of disability, it is really important to get that comprehensive testing to support your gifted child. However, again, the value of that depends on your family. Um, and then there's special populations where testing becomes an issue because there's special characteristics that testers are not used to. For example, it's really tough to test gifted girls, especially profoundly gifted. The twice exceptional, you really, if you're going to be testing a twice exceptional child, you need somebody with experience testing 2E children. Your child shouldn't be the guinea pig on which this young psychologist learns on. Yes, obviously we want young psychologists to learn how to do this, but try to find somebody through your local gifted community that is already established and can help you. Gifted cubed, really tough to identify. Gifted cube is gifted, minority, and twice exceptional at the same time. And then English as a second language learner, it's really tough to test the population due to their cultural and linguistic differences. So there are two kinds of testing if you do decide to test your child. One is achievement testing, and the other one is IQ testing. These tests can be done in a silo. For example, you can take the PSAT, that's an achievement test. You can take NWA MAP, COGAT test, those are achievement tests. Or you can have the testing be as part of a comprehensive diagnostic screen. For IQ testing and achievement testing, these things are normed against specific ages and grades. So usually a psychologist will help you pick a most appropriate test. If you think that your child is profoundly gifted, it's actually very important to find a tester that could do something that's called WISC-5 extended norms. Without that, you're not going to get a full picture of your child if that's what you're looking for. And if they don't know how to use that instrument, go somewhere else. PG and 2E students, children, adults, doesn't matter, really require expert testing. Again, get a recommendation before you just go. People who test PG kids, again, need to know and administer high ceiling. You need to know what you're testing the child for because certain programs will not accept certain testing. So you have to be really, really specific when you select the tests. And then 2E testers need to understand the population really well. What does masking look like? What does compensation look like? And also understand what a sensory profile is and how it might affect the child in their life and also on test day. And then some of this testing for the disabilities can be done by school districts. School districts are not going to bother to test your child in general to see if they're gifted just for fun. CPS does have free gifted testing to get into the selective enrollment. But outside of these kinds of programs, you can't really get free testing, only on the disability side. And it depends on the state. So some states have universal testing. This is something that I very strongly advocate for in the state of Illinois, to give us some universal testing for IQ. And that's because it would identify the gifted kids and support them, but would also identify students that need supports and identify them before they're failing in school. So I think universal testing would just be a win everywhere. And it would actually be a cost savings to our school districts in the long run and to society in the long run, because it would provide the just right supports as early as possible. The next piece here is I'm going to provide with some resources. I've got local resources in this column over here, and I've got national resources in this column over here. So this is Illinois, and this is national. And then I've got it kind of by category. So how this works is the thing at the top of the page always applies to you, and then you move down the list and add to it what else applies to you based on your IQ. A lot of you will not know what the IQ is or what the achievement level is of your child yet. So this is something you're bookmarking for if you decide to find out one day. So Illinois Association for Gifted Children, I strongly recommend everybody in Illinois joins it. Chicago Gifted Community Center, that is who we're working with to bring you this talk. You should totally join that organization because Illinois Association for Gifted Children has an academic focus to prepare teachers and administrators for supporting gifted students and also to educate parents, help them with advocacy. Chicago Gifted Community Center focuses on the whole child, the whole family unit. You do not have to have numbers to join this organization. If you self-identify, that's good enough. So these organizations don't check you. Northwestern CTD, I think they're looking for the top 20 to 15%. Dominican Gifted and Talented, it's a summer program only. Excellent if you are looking for local resources for enrichment for your students. For the next IQ band 130 to 144 locally, we've got, there's a bunch of Facebook groups. There are gifted schools. There's the Chicago area Mensa, and then we also support this. We do have programming in the summer that, and sometimes on the weekends that supports these other ranges, but we generally focus at 130 down because nobody else is doing it here. And then we do have a Facebook group for Illinois for Davidson Young Scholars. We do not have a PGR Facebook group because there's so few, and everybody already knows who everybody is. At the national level, we've got, again, NAGC, I mentioned earlier, National Association for Gifted Children, saying it's supporting the emotional needs of gifted children. Davidson, which has a bunch of resources that they've collated for gifted, regardless of the level of giftedness, even though they do focus at 145 and up. There's Grow Gifted. They collate information on research articles about gifted, and they do peer reviews and things like that for that. The Colorado Association for Gifted and Talented is excellent because they have tons of talks like this and videos that I would highly recommend. Phenomenal ones. Hoagie's Gifted, the website isn't that great. It's an older website, collected a huge amount of information on gifted. And then there are always Facebook groups. Now with Facebook, you know, you have to be careful with what you're reading and making sure it's valid. Don't believe everything you see on Facebook. However, it is a resource to connect with people about specialty questions that you might have. And then we get down to specific people that I would strongly recommend you watch talks. They do a much better talk than I would ever do. And I still watch all of their talks. They're amazing. Is Dr. Linda Silverman. She actually, again, wrote the extended norms. So she's like, she knows everything about gifted. Her talks are incredible. And then Dr. Patty Gatto Walden, she is, again, phenomenal. And then locally, if you ever see Michelle Kane in Illinois, I mean, she does talks outside of Illinois too, but if you ever see Michelle Kane at any conference, you should go, you should just go if you have the opportunity to listen to her. And again, all these people have YouTube talks. If you're really struggling with a gifted issue and you want some really high quality gifted testing, these are at the national level so they can support people traveling to them and getting very comprehensive testing. Expect wait lists of 1 to 2 years. So I want to talk about these other areas of giftedness because they're just not covered on the testing. So again, the testing is very biased and based on very academic tasks that some people have determined are like important, but it leaves out a lot of facets of humanity and giftedness. So empathy, again, what's inherited, and giftedness is highly heritable. What's inherited is giftedness, not necessarily a specific area. So a child could be gifted with unusual empathy, right? And if that's their greatest gift, there's no test for it, but that giftedness should be valued and supported. Grit. There is no test for this. There's some testing around this for adults, but we don't put it on an IQ test. We don't seem to value it. And this is actually a much better predictor of future success than the academic testing. Grit is probably the coolest gift you could have. Intuition, also very cool. If a person has a lot of intuition, a lot of creativity. Emotional regulation, a person that can really regulate emotionally, they're probably going to have a lot of grit. They're probably going to have a lot of empathy. They're going to be pretty gifted and pretty darn successful. Social skills, you could have excellent social skills as a gift. Let's not forget the arts and sports talents. Like, let's say that there's somebody who is the best runner in the school district or in the state, but academically they're not performing, they're probably gifted in 2E. If you can do that with sports, you're probably gifted. Okay, so let's not rule out people whose area of interest are the arts or sports. So um, people who have an excess of talent in these areas, they are gifted, but the IQ testing or academic testing might not capture it because the kids tunnel in these areas, right? And so they develop there first. Later, as adults, they might show giftedness in other ways. This is a fun one. Why does giftedness exist? So again, it is a heritable trait. It runs within families. It is selected for by evolution at all costs. So what happens is when a population of people is stressed, the gifted is who survive. Now, unfortunately, someone had to invent. So unfortunately, that means that there's a lot of 2E tied into gifted families, and that is because the evolution was going to conserve giftedness at any cost of any additional thing that got tied into it, as far as rare diseases and things like that in rare populations. So you will see a lot of profoundly gifted individuals where the family is suffering from some sort of an autoimmune difference or some other difference. There's a great slide on Grow Gifted about this, and they're working this up, which is really exciting. But the bottom line is, at different parts, whether you believe in evolution or creationism, doesn't matter. At different parts, someone had to invent the fire and the wheel. And then those people came ahead of their time because those things weren't around when they came to the scene. We don't know who those people are, but let's just assume they were not ordinary people because they figured the stuff out before other people did. And they brought us eventually to where we are today. Okay, so the other thing that you should know is gifted children are usually a symptom of gifted parents. One thing that you should know is while an IQ is not a constant and it changes in a person's lifetime, um, there is, Dr. Silverman actually has a really great talk for adults to figure out if you're gifted, because a lot of parents will say, I'm not gifted, I'm just an overachiever, I'm not gifted, I'm just smart. But actually, if you have a gifted child, that is a symptom that you are gifted. And then IQs within a family, generally speaking, will be within 5 points of each other, and there have been studies on that. And then when people say, no, my other child is completely normal, don't assume that they are. They might just be twice exceptional, or they might have one of those intangible gifts that I talked about here, and they're not scoring on the IQ test because they're very busy in these other areas where they are gifted. And so kids really focus. Then the other thing is that you should know some bad news. When your baby got delivered, they forgot to include the manual. So it's really important that you surround yourself with community so that you can have others for support to replace the manual, essentially. One of the things that you'll find out for gifted kids, generally speaking, the parenting books don't work. The more gifted, the worse the situation will be. You'll see that your timeline is accelerated from parenting books. You're not on the same timeline. And then the problem becomes also is that you're trying to keep up with your child's accelerated timeline. And that means that you cannot keep up with them long enough to read the appropriate chapters in the parenting books. However, don't worry, because your kids one day will get bored enough to find your parenting books, read them, and then tell you what you're doing wrong with your parenting. So they'll be happy to do that for you. Another question is this a gift or is it a curse? Well, that's the thing. Parenting gifted kids is really tough because they're just more all the time. And so you really, people who don't have one of these kids, they don't understand how difficult it is to have one of these kids. It is a double-sided coin, that's for sure. And so it takes a lot of coping and creativity from parents to cope with having these kids. The other thing that's a kind of a myth is gifted kids can still do incredibly, incredibly stupid things, and also dangerous things. They can often figure something out that's quite dangerous, and you should not treat them like a young adult when they do these things. This is to them just normal child's play. They can be early in many uncomfortable ways. One time, my child was at the swimming pool learning how to swim, and the lifeguards were talking about birth control. The next day, my child was 5. She informed her entire class in school. I got a call from other parents. They're always listening. They're seldom indifferent. They have fewer gray areas. They're always listening to everything you say. Anything you leave out, they'll come out behind you and read your computer and your phone. Do not leave anything out. Do not talk in front of them about anything that you assume they didn't hear or they didn't understand. They pick up everything very quickly, and they'll jump to very frequently the wrong conclusion and be terrified. Um, why is it important to challenge gifted kids in school? It's because it gives them an opportunity to develop responsibility, decision making, problem solving at their level. It allows them to develop a strong work ethic instead of thinking, oh, everything is easy, I can do barely any work here. And then it teaches them to cope with failure as opposed to like reaching college, and then the first time something is hard for you is your graduate school, and you don't know how to cope with the difficulty because everything up to that point was a cakewalk. They some kids really derive their self-worth from accomplishments. So if they don't have a chance to accomplish anything, they're going to be suffering from that. And again, the recognition by their peers is really important. They need to develop they need special education because they need to develop to their full academic and intellectual potential, but also unless they're challenged, they will not develop the skills to regulate themselves through challenges. So one of the common do's that you'll see in other gifted talks is praise and notice their effort, not their achievement. Give opportunity for achievement, but that's not what you're praising. You're praising their effort. Okay. Keep a record of your child's milestones. Keep work samples. You'll probably need them. And then make sure that the child is taught to their strengths. These are like the obvious kind of core things. But I'm going to talk about things you won't see in other talks. Mistakes. Making mistakes is a huge, very important skill. What I want you to know is that if a child always thinks that they're always getting everything right, they're used to never challenging themselves, making mistakes is a skill that doesn't come easy to them. So one of the things that's really cool to do is take pictures or videos of when your child is just beginning to learn something, like learn to play piano or violin. And then at various intervals, take more data that you could show them. And then you could show them the difference between knowing and learning. So if they're struggling with something, say, I'll never understand this, or this is too hard, or I'm not good, or I can't make any progress, you could show them these early videos of where they were previously. And then you could say, look how far you've come with just time and effort, right? So you want to continue to praise effort and show them that they can make progress if they put in the work. You need to show them that you can make mistakes too, and that you do, and on how you process those mistakes. Do it in front of them, talk it out. If you show yourself as too perfect, they will aspire to be perfect like mom and dad or their teachers. So show mistakes and show an emotionally appropriate response to mistakes and life's disappointments. Don't hide them from your kids. And then talk it out so that they can see how you're managing the mistake. They'll do the same thing. If they see this, it'll really help them. If you show everything as perfect all the time, they will expect to be perfect like you. So some more actions to take now. Every day, play or spend time with your child at least 10 minutes a day, following your child's lead, letting them determine what happens without criticizing or putting demands on them like questions. Questions are demands. So just enjoy your kids without necessarily imposing anything on them when you're spending time. 10 minutes a day, most parents can afford this. Build community for your family. Go find the other families that are the closest to your family in your philosophy when it comes to raising your gifted child. If you have a twice exceptional child, go find others with a similar twice exceptionality and experience and same ages so that you can have each other's support. A lot of gifted families, they take, but they don't give. So surround yourself by other families that are willing to support you, not just be supported by you. Scaffold any weaknesses that your child might have. Teach all gifted kids about bullying. It'll happen in a neurotypical classroom, and they will not even know it's happening. Watch what you say and leave around. We covered that. And then you want lots and lots of focus on socialization and mindfulness, because a lot of gifted kids, they'll avoid talking to neurotypical kids because they feel like they can't connect. They still have to learn. I think we already talked about how much is too much overexcitability. If it gets in the way of everyday life and detracts from your child's learning experience or social experience, that is an opportunity for you to scaffold that challenge or that twice exceptionality. I don't like when people assume or divide about gifted kids. 2E is kind of a fluid state. So don't be afraid of like the 2E kid that's going to break your kid. That's not what happens. Don't think that like the non-2E kid will not understand your 2E kid. That's not how children work. And there needs to be more support because a lot of the gifted don't even realize that they're 2E. Uh, some advice on how to raise healthy gifted children. Don't rescue your child constantly from having to wait a little, be a little uncomfortable, having to make do a little with what they have, having to work a little on something to figure it out. Let them struggle a little bit. I'm not saying overwhelm them, but help them to develop tolerance. Gifted kids can develop problems if they don't learn how to do delay tolerance, distress tolerance, and demand tolerance. So um, getting these things down at different ages and stages is protective for your child. All right, some weird files. The more gifted, the more there is metabolic, immune, autoimmune, autonomic problems in families. Doesn't mean everybody in the family. But sometimes until you address this, and again, Grow Gifted is working this up right now, sometimes you cannot resolve any 2E until you mitigate some of this stuff. So some conditions just come with high IQ. An average person with dyslexia actually has an IQ of 130. And I see there's a past board member of the Everyone Reading, which is the Dyslexia International chapter of Illinois, in our conference. I asked her. And so I learned that from going to these conferences and learning more about this. There's something called pathological demand avoidance and like high functioning autism. A lot of the time that comes with higher IQ. That could present another facet of challenges for parents. We can also argue that these sensitivities here breed intelligence. There's also generational trauma. We have a talk about that coming up. And that requires additional parenting skills and additional coping challenges for everybody in the family. We need to recognize that IQ does change throughout the lifetime, not inside the person, but what they can do on the outside on the test. So a lot of people will say 5.5 is the best time to actually test a gifted child for a variety of reasons. And then just don't forget, the higher the IQ, the more societal labels are challenged in families, such as gender, career choices. The higher the IQ, the more the child might be questioning in those areas. Gender dysphoria is something that a lot of profoundly gifted people experience. And guess what? Everything is more ungifted, so that's even more intense. So schooling versus emotional needs. There are different kinds of gifted schools or schools that support gifted children. So you could go to a regular school, and then how do you focus on these emotional needs then? You have to focus on something like athletics and music. And sometimes you have to reach the child with what they need, with what we call after schooling or weekend schooling. And then the regular school becomes a babysitter. Then there are gifted schools. Again, they might not be that different than regular schools at times. Online schools, I honestly, sometimes there's no option when somebody is rural or really twice exceptional. But I strongly believe that kids need in-person socialization to thrive with other children like them. Then there are also schools that are gifted friendly. Montessori schools, natures and forest schools, Waldorf can be at times gifted friendly because it allows a lot of choices for gifted kids. There are co-ops that are very frequently heavy. If they're secular co-ops, especially, they might be heavy on gifted kids, and you might be able to find options there. Another option for schooling to help meet the emotional needs of kids is the homeschooling. So in many parts of Illinois, this is hard. For example, of all places, Chicago city proper is actually kind of hard because there are very few homeschooling families. It's kind of, it's almost like everybody else kind of looks down at it. It's changed because of the pandemic, and I'm really grateful that there are more people interested in homeschooling. A lot of people don't understand what homeschooling is. Online schooling is not homeschooling. And then there are also summer camps to kind of create some of these enrichment opportunities. But guess what? That just creates more pressure on gifted parents. They're there in December trying to figure out their best summer camps for gifted kids. It just creates more pressure on people. And now we're going to open this up to questions. So we have people here in person. We have people online. You're welcome to type your questions once I can stop this presentation and figure out let's see, how to see your chat questions. So I'm looking to see if anybody has chat questions, and then here I'm looking to see if anybody has in-person questions. No questions? Oh, that'll be a very short talk. Yeah, do you have a question? Yeah.
The objective of this to teach them to their strengths. Then how do you think about the areas that they're not that strong in? Because sometimes they would like really, like you said, they have an unusually long attention span, and they just focus on what they're really good at, and they kind of avoid the areas.
Yes. Yes. So what you're looking for is to stay within the top range of their tolerance there. So you don't need them to be necessarily even in the areas. Like as long as they're at, I would say, age level. So there's a pain point trade-off, right? So you don't want to push your child beyond what's going to distress them. But at the same time, you want them to have some skill in every area. Like, for example, Patty Gadawadden talks about the 5 areas. Like she talks about the body, the person's emotions are also some important things. And like a lot of gifted kids, she talks about how they're in adults, they're in their head and it's the brain, and then the rest of the body is neglected. So what you're describing could happen with academic subjects, or the child could shun all physical fitness. So you definitely want to, so what you want to do is you want to bridge. So you want to take their area of strength, let's say it's mathematics, and now you want them to be able to read. So you want to find books that have mathematics topics that they're interested in. And that might help bridge it. Where do you get the book recommendations? You can use the local Facebook groups or the national Facebook groups. Davidson sometimes has lists of topics. Other gifted parents of kids with similar interests. If you find an older parent, you might say, do you still need your books about math for your young child? Can I have them now? So a lot of the time you can kind of bridge it by somebody who's walked the path before you and has a good list. Again, writing, you could tie it to the mathematics that they're doing if that's not an area that they're interested in. Art, again, you can do a ton of art that involves mathematics. So same with language. When I took abstract algebra in college, there was a passage that Shakespeare wrote that my professor showed me, and it like had a essentially using language arts. It had a proof in it, a mathematical proof that applies to abstract algebra. And so like you could bridge it the other way. Like here's how we can express these concepts through language. So you want to find something that the child likes to get them to the point of some minimum proficiency in the area that they hate. And the goal is to show them that they can be competent, to praise their effort, and then to kind of celebrate the wins with them and to make it super fun. So that's my advice. And again, to allow them to spend lots and lots of time in their area of strength and interest, because otherwise they're going to feel like they have no agency over what is happening. They need agency. They need to feel like they have some control over what they do. So if they only like one thing, and that one thing they're only allowed to do for 30 minutes a day, and the rest of their day 12 or more hours is spent on things they are not interested in, that's going to be kind of miserable for anybody, gifted or otherwise. So if they have a drive and they feel strongest in that area, you want to give them the time to spend in it, but you do not have to neglect the other areas. You just have to tie the other concepts to what they like so that they don't like. A lot of the time it's the labeling. Don't call it whatever the child dislikes. We had a child that hated writing, so we called it journaling. I had a student that came to my first day of art class and said, I hate drawing. I'm not going to do anything if we're drawing today. I said, oh, great, no problem. You can still do the same lessons everybody else, but how do you feel about erasing? What? Yeah, you can achieve the same thing if you're willing to erase. Like, it's just a labeling difference. I could have done so many other things, but the child was so intrigued. He did the same lesson, but in reverse from the other children, because I created a dark pigment page for him and all he had to do is erase. The problem there is he didn't like the feel of a pencil on the paper, and he actually really enjoyed the feel of eraser on paper. And so we solved that problem lickety split. I could have come up with 1,000 other solutions, but there is a way to bridge them. And a lot of the time is they get hung up on the language. Don't call it the thing they dislike. It's not tricking them. It's just helping bring in their strengths into what they're not interested in. So every person would rather spend the bulk of their time doing something that they feel competent in. And that drives this desire to sit in their area of strengths because they feel strong and competent, like they're achieving, feels really good to them. So yes, they're going to avoid everything else, whether they've tried it or not. They're just going to sit in what they know and what they know they're good at. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Let me see. We have a question online. Let's see. We have. Oh, I'm sorry. Esther says, can you repeat this question? The question was, if a child is really specialized in one area, how do you help the child work in other areas in which they're not interested or don't want to do, essentially? Let's see, homeschooling resources. Laura is looking for homeschooling resources. Let's see, Laura is looking to create her own co-op. Resources for gifted children in kind of a co-op, not a drop off, but really involved in the learning as a professor. So Laura is a professor. She wants to create a co-op. Well, first of all, there is already a co-op like this, and it's called Logic in Illinois. Are you aware of this? It's in Skokie. Okay, so on the CGCC website, you will find it. Let me see if I can share it. Yeah, so those that walked before you have, to some extent, solved some of this. Now, the co-op might not be exactly how you want it to be from day one, but that doesn't mean that there isn't opportunity to work on some of this. So if you look at the programs of the CGCC website, you will see the Logic Homeschool Co-op, and then you will see their various classes. It's very inexpensive because it is run by other parents. And essentially with that co-op, you get what you put in. And so I would strongly recommend, before you try to do this on your own, which is an excruciatingly difficult task, check out what they have and see. They definitely start by, I think, as early as age 5. I think they have some programming, and see how well that fits the needs of your family before you try to do this by yourself. It is ambitious and hard, and it's not that you shouldn't do it. Oh, it's no longer active. There is some sort of a South Side micro school that I've heard about. So yeah, I think So we've created recently a Gifted Principals group on Facebook. You can look for that group. You could email me about it. It's not very active because most organizations don't have the time to invest in helping other organizations because it's just really hard to run a gifted org. Um, so from the homeschooling perspective, what are the resources for running a co-op? I mean, I think that you basically have to decide what your curriculum is and find professors that can work with younger students. And if you want resources, Laura says, I don't use Facebook. If you want resources, you're going to have to take one for your child's team and get on Facebook. I'm sorry. Because that's how you're going to find the most people, unfortunately, and the most resources. That's where all the 30 to 50, 60-year-olds are to share resources. And then it's to get resources. So Laura says, I'm well connected in the city, but I'm saying Facebook will connect you to other micro schools where they're solving the same problem in other cities and states. So it might be a useful resource, and it's faster for a lot of founders of a lot of schools than getting on the phone with you or emailing. Just an idea. You don't have to take my idea. So for again, once you define your curriculum, it really becomes about finding the right teachers and the right curriculum. Obviously, if parents are involved, they can help mitigate some of the twice exceptionalities of people who are going to be wanting to be involved with any new micro school. But if you, it's something that you're going to have to learn is how to manage individual family differences. That's going to be the largest challenge with a micro school. Do we have any other questions? That was an interesting question. I like that. Anybody else? No? All right. Well, I'm going to give it 10 more seconds while people are processing. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to thank everybody for coming to the talk. And we have 3 talks coming up. One is testing and identification. That is in the first Sunday in April. We've got gifted girls coming up in the first Sunday in May. And then we've got generational trauma and the gifted in the first Sunday of June. And that's kind of the scope of our series for this academic school year. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank you, Irene.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Well, that is that. Yeah, hopefully that was helpful. I think you weren't expecting to get this information, so hopefully. Oh, okay. To the. Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah. I hope it was helpful. Yeah. You guys have any other questions? So this, I started it, and it is we've been operating as a school for 4 years, and before that as a co-op for a year. Yeah. So we're 5 years old. I started it since the beginning. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I started it in 2018, January 2018. Yeah, so I guess we're going into 6th year now. Yeah. It's my first child, so I have a very unusual child, and I didn't understand any of this except as it had transpired, and I was always behind what my child needed because the resources just were not collated and didn't exist. So my child started drawing at 9 years old. And I had a little drawing of one of our students here that's 4, or that's 5 now. And drawing is another way of telling a person's IQ. It's kind of fun. So at 9 months old, my child started drawing circles and lines. And then a week later, she said balloon. Okay. And then there was about a month of balloon, but by 10 months, and that's all she wanted to do. She spent like 9 months old. She would crawl to get the markers and she would use whatever she could. And she would just, I have hundreds of pages of like balloon, 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 balloon. And then at about 10 months, something magical happened. The balloon became people. And so she would say, Mommy, and Daddy, and me, and it would be balloon families. And children, they always draw biggest what's important in their head. So she would be like this, because kids are the center. And then I would be like the second biggest, his mom. And then it would be just these things. And then by 12 months, she could draw a person with about 8 or 9 body parts. That is a milestone for a 5-year-old. 7 body parts is a milestone for a 5-year-old. So 7 distinct features, and like each eye counts. So I will show you. And so you can tell that the child is gifted even from their drawing. Now, what you cannot tell is the opposite, that they're not gifted, because not all kids are going to be into this. They don't have the small motor and the visual skills. It's not normal. So don't judge. If a kid cannot draw, that means nothing about their giftedness. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hair would be 8, ears 9. Okay. Excuse me, how many can your 5-year-old do? Yeah. So gifted kids, they achieve this early. There's a chart that I have, it's 30% gifted. And so these kids can do, you can kind of tell from their drawings how gifted they're going to be. Pretty incredible. So my child was doing that. What she wasn't doing is walking. She walked at 9 months. She took 1 step. She fell on her butt and she never wanted to walk again. But by 2.5, she was reading. I think by 3, she read the Wizard of Oz books. By 5, she read The Hobbit. By 7, she read all the Harry Potter books and the rest of the Lord of the Rings series and a whole bunch of other books. We're not talking about me reading to her. She was reading it. By 10, she had a perfect score on the PSAT. By 12, she was over, I think, 1,500 on the SAT. That's without any training or tutoring or practice. That's just how she comes. She's more than 6 years ahead academically and is ready for college at 14. But she's not in college because she's not emotionally mature enough for that. And so I wanted to create a school where the kids wouldn't have to go to college. They could stay here, be with same age peers, and at the same time, they could learn at their full academic potential. Now, the topics, because we're a small school, might be limited. And like, do we offer a psychology course this year? No. How many history classes are we offering at an AP level? Just 1 this year. So we'll cycle them. But is it everything for everybody? No. But is she, are the kids at their ability level with other kids that understand them? Yes. So that's the goal of the school. As you saw from the little sorting exercise, it's different. Yeah. No teaching background. That's why I didn't know my kid was gifted. I mean, people started telling me, like, I remember a mom in some sort of a mommy and me class looking at my kids, like the kids were, it's a 3-year-old class and they were painting lines and my kid drew a snowman and she was like maybe 18 months. And the parents like, your kid is gifted. And then why can't I remember being in a Chinese class with my daughter, um, because my godkids only spoke Chinese. We have grandparents there. I needed to learn some Chinese. And so we were in a mommy and me Chinese class, and the older parent kids couldn't understand how my child could repeat 20 word sentences um, after hearing it one time. These kids are just wired differently. Now, most gifted kids are not to the profoundly gifted level, right? So most kids are not going to be here. That's 0.003% of the population. But we're the one of the only schools in the world that can support this. And you saw the kids of the profoundly gifted, the 7-year-old, and you guessed that they were ahead of the 10th grader.
Do you notice as they grow older,
It never gets smaller, and this is where there is a lot of misinterpretation. So if you take a average kid, an average kid can learn the 1 year of school equals 1 year of learning. A gifted kid, 1 year of school can equal to 18 to 36 months of schooling, so 1 to 3 years. And so for a gifted kid, it looks like this. So instead of 1, they go up like this until they cannot. And then these could be different. Like 1 year, they might go up 1, and the next year they could go up 4. So there's never a chance to catch up. How is this kid going to catch up here when they're, then here? Like, you can't catch up. So now in the public schools, we accelerate kids like 1 or 2 years, but they pull apart then, and then they're bored and disengaged once again. So really tough. We have to do a lot of the training here because there is very little, and it's also very expensive at the state level and time consuming. We as a state are not producing gifted teachers. There's only one master's in gifted education. Now it's in a pilot at Concordia University. There was a long-standing program that closed 3 years ago at Northeastern University, and our kind of online training program is defunct. Northwestern has a class, but it's not for credit, and it's more like a gifted boot camp that's going to give a teacher version of the talk I just gave. And it's like a few hours, and it just gives the teachers a sense of what to expect when working with a gifted kid, how to identify that you have a gifted kid in your classroom. But the best producer of like kind of teachers for gifted is not going to be at this point in Illinois. So we also try to import teachers when we can. But generally speaking, like some of our teachers, they found us. Like our science professor found us, was working at CTD, and has only ever taught gifted kids, and just came to us and said, all I do is teach gifted kids. Can I come teach your gifted kids? So kind of cool. He commutes by choice from Rockford, Illinois, every day to teach our kids because that's his passion. So it's hard to find in Illinois, but as we grow bigger and have more resources, we'll be able to unfortunately import more teachers, or we have to train them. So a lot of our teachers are really passionate about education, and they like working with the student one-on-one. They like to be creative. They like to customize curriculum, whereas other teachers don't. They want to be handed the curriculum, like in public school, get handed the curriculum, and then you find a parent volunteer to make 30 copies of the same worksheet to pass out, and they make packets for the month, and then the volunteers come in and make packets for the next month. And then the teacher is just passing out the same worksheets to all the kids. Or there might be 3 groups of worksheets, but it's not great. Because if you have 30 kids in the classroom, you're just going to spend more than half the class on behavior management. If you have 4 kids in the classroom, you'll still have to do it for a couple of minutes because they get chatty, but you have the time to actually teach students, right? Children, gifted children, are just still children. They're still going to be rambunctious and excited, and they're going to be coming down the hall into your class talking about whatever they were talking about in the last class. It takes a minute or 2 to settle them down. and they might need some reminder to focus just like regular kids do. But then you have all the time with them. Great question. Yeah. I have, unfortunately, the next presentation starting, which is our Zoom online meeting. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We have another one of these with the topic of testing identification coming up in a month. We're going to go through in detail the levels, the different tests, the test flavors, how to select a good tester, what to look for in a good tester, and what to make of test results. So, be interesting. Thank you, guys.